and welcome to The New Normal, the show where we look at how the world is adapting to the strange times of 2020. Here in Paris, we're back in lockdown, although this time the schools are open and more people are allowed to go to work, so there are plenty of passers-by on the streets of Paris. In today's show, we'll also be showing you the new normal in Iraq, India and Burundi with reports from our correspondents. But we're starting off in Belarus. The Eastern European country has seen months of protests and strikes. It started in August when longtime President Alexander Lukashenko refused to step down after a deeply flawed election. His opponents have vowed to keep on demonstrating despite fear and brutal crackdowns from police. This report from Minsk from our correspondent Gulliver Cragg.
Just before 7 a.m, hundreds of workers pour into the Minsk tractor factory. Few want to talk about strike action. Oleg, though, is on strike. Later, video appears online of workers protesting inside the plant, but management says production was not disrupted. Meanwhile, in the centre of Minsk, students try to gather for a protest. Unsure whether it's safe to emerge from the metro, they wait. Turns out it wasn't safe.
Начинаем переходить дорогу, нас перекрывают со всех сторон и начинают просто выносить.
But these friends are determined.
Пока не задерживали, но все может быть. Вот. Страшно, очень страшно. Но, знаете...
Страшнее жить в этой стране еще очень много лет с этим руководством.
Other students have gathered at the factory to support the striking workers. But Jan, who says he's not striking, is unimpressed.
Ну зачем? Если меня заберут, мама будет волноваться. Все решится без меня, и без вас, и без никого другого.
The students despair of this attitude.
Нас власть не слышит. Силовой сценарий у нас не получается. И единственное, что нам остается, это экономически дожать этот режим.
But suddenly he sees riot police arriving.
Подъехала большая маршрутка с тонированными стеклами. Поэтому я думаю, что лучше аккуратненько уйти.
The police don't always win, though.
Since 1993, more than 1,400 journalists have been killed around the world, according to the UN. And in 9 out of 10 cases, the murderers have gone unpunished. Some countries are especially deadly for reporters. In Iraq, 3 newsrooms have been killed already this year, some multiple times. This report from Baghdad by Lucille Wasserman and Jack Hewson.
Saif Ali is a journalist for Digital TV, an Iraqi channel targeted by militias on several occasions this year. He keeps photos and videos of each attack on his phone.
يعني حقيقة عام كامل عشنا أجواء كبيرة من الرعب والخوف. القناة تعرضت إلى إحراق وتفليش وثم إغلاق وثم المرحلة الأخيرة أيضا إحراق بشكل كامل. يعني هذا اليوم رعب، عشنا رعب، يعني عشنا أجواء من الخوف. واضطررت اليوم يعني خصوصا بعد الحرق الأخير اضطررت لترك العمل لفترة والاختفاء أنا وعائلتي بسبب التهديدات المتواصلة التي كانت عن طريق مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي والتي أو عن طريق قنوات التليجرام بشكل أو بآخر.
These images, shot by France 24 after the first attack on Dijla's premises in October 2019, show the extent of the damage. At least 2 other Iraqi channels suffered a similar fate that day. The journalists targeted accused pro-Iran militias of being responsible for the attacks. Militia groups have been angered by coverage of the anti-Iranian protests during this period. But Saif also criticises the government's silence.
كثير اليوم من الجماعات المسلحة التي تنتمي للأحزاب أو بعض الجهات وأغلبها ربما مدعوم خارجيا اليوم تمتلك سطوة قوية أقوى من الحكومة. بالتالي اليوم هذا الخوف الذي لدينا هو خوف مشروع. يعني هذا الخوف قد يصل إلى حقيقة إلى أرض الواقع فيما يتعلق قد يطالنا الاغتيال باعتبار أن التهديدات هي متواصلة أصلا. لكن مسألة الاغتيال هي مسألة واردة جدا في المستقبل. يعني مستقبل مظلم اليوم ينتظرنا كصحفيين هنا في العراق.
4 journalists, including 2 from Dijla, have been murdered in Iraq this year. and yet no one has been arrested for these crimes. In October, Human Rights Watch released a report titled "When Will Iraq Start Protecting Its Journalists?", imploring the government to act. The NGO says the government not only is failing to protect its journalists, but it's even using its powers to silence those who are critical of them.
India's economy is still reeling from one of the world's strictest coronavirus lockdowns. More than 21 million salaried jobs were lost between April and August, mainly among accountants, engineers and teachers. Now, an employment scheme for poor farm workers has become a real lifeline for struggling professionals. And it's a symbol of how the middle-class dreams of millions of Indians is unravelling. This report from our India Bureau.
Irappa Boge's dream to become an engineer was nourished in this very house. It's a small one-room dwelling where he grew up with his parents and two younger brothers. His father, a labourer, had to take a loan of almost 3,000 euros, a small fortune for him, to put Irappa through university.
Neither my father or mother nor anyone in my family has had an education. So I thought I would become an engineer and make enough money so that they no longer have to work.
After graduating, he had been working comfortable office jobs in big cities like Pune and Bangalore, until the pandemic hit and his company shut down. Since then, he's had to take up the plough. Irappa was supposed to be his family's ticket out of poverty, but now he's back home in his village in the southern state of Karnataka, digging ditches under a government program.
We had difficulty getting a meal without working. I was so worried and depressed. I then found out about this work under Narega.
Narega, or the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, a government scheme, guarantees 100 days of unskilled work in rural areas. It was set up in 2006 to help reduce poverty and provide some income stability for poor families. Irappa used to make 230 euros a month. Now he makes 3 euros a day.
I feel so bad right now because I was working in a big company as a manager and making good money. I never thought I would have to leave my job and come do work like this.
Since April, 60 million households applied for work under this government scheme, a record since its inception in 2006. Irappa is working alongside MBA graduates, bank employees and other professionals.
Before 2020, under this scheme, we used to have only unskilled workers. But this year, out of the 300-odd labourers, 30 are highly qualified.
While unemployment numbers have improved over the past couple of months, experts believe that it will take years for the job market to properly bounce back. Until then, millions in India will have to put their dreams on hold.
Next to Africa, where 5 years after fleeing their homes, refugees from Burundi have been returning from neighbouring Rwanda. Some 400,000 people fled Burundi in 2015 after then-President Pierre Nkurunziza led a deadly crackdown on dissidents. Nkurunziza has since died of COVID, but there are still big concerns for returning refugees in a country where human rights abuses remain rampant. This report from our correspondents in the region.
These 500 refugees from Mahama camp in Rwanda are on their way back to Burundi. They fled their home country after political violence erupted in 2015.
We're happy to return to our native country. Our families, friends and neighbors tell us that peace is back.
This is the 6th repatriation since Burundian President Evariste Ndayishimiye came to power 4 months ago. But relations between the two countries are still tense despite Kigali's efforts to normalize them. Burundi accuses Rwanda of harboring its opponents.
We can't compare repatriation with diplomatic issues between both countries. Our responsibility is to facilitate the refugees. Even the Congolese, anyone who are refugees in Rwanda wants to go back, it's our mandate to facilitate him to go back. Since August, we registered more than 10,000 refugees because it's the activity continuing.
The agency supports the repatriation, but refugees are free to choose whether they leave or stay.
Most of them are farmers and surely want to return to their land so that they can resume a normal life in their country of origin. The follow-up we do with the refugees who have returned to Rwanda tends to show that they have arrived in their areas of origin in safety.
The repatriation process has divided the refugee community in Kigali. While some are eager to return home, those who protested against the government in 2015 remain skeptical. A UN body found that despite a change in leadership in Burundi, human rights violations have continued.
That's it for this week's show. Thanks for watching. Thanks also to Sylvain Rousseau on camera and our producer, Natasha Milleray. Just time to leave you with pictures of Machu Picchu in Peru, which has reopened to the public again after an 8-month coronavirus closure. An Inca ritual was held at the 15th century citadel to thank the gods for its reopening, even though only 675 visitors a day will be allowed in. That's around 30% of peak numbers. See you next time on France 24.
Culture Daily. Every day, France 24 fills you in on the latest in the world of culture. In your Encore magazine, meet the artists, get to know them and their work, watch them and listen to them talking about their creations and the era we live in. Stay up to date with all things cultural in France and around the world. Get your culture fix daily on France 24 and France24.com.